We were able to focus in on the things that don't really tell us how a person flies an airplane or how they care for each other. If you boil it down, those are the two most important things for our pilot group. Making sure that they have the technical proficiency and the professionalism to fly.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
What is up, pilot? How's it going? How's your day? I hope your day is awesome today. Mine is totally awesome. And do you know why it's totally awesome? I just got to interview Cory Glenn, the director of hiring, the director of pilot recruitment at American Airlines. Can you believe it? What an awesome interview this was. And I got to tell you, first I got to say thank you to my friend Bill Sims, the owner, one of the co-owners of Spitfire Elite Interview Consulting. We were at the National Gay Pilots Association winter warm-up in Palm Springs, California. And we were at the booth. I was working, I was talking, enjoying conversation with so many cool people. And he comes around the corner with Cory because they're old buds. And he says, "Look, man, this is Nick. You got to do our podcast." And you know what? Cory said yes. And not only did he say yes, but we met the next morning in the Renaissance Hotel in some random room that they let me sit down in for an impromptu podcast session. And we talked for like an hour and 20 minutes. It was unreal. We talked and we talked and we talked. And this is how it went. I reached out to the Spitfire community and I said, "Guys and girls, what questions do you have for Cory?" And they sent me a load of questions. And I went through those questions and we talked about a lot of them. And we just peeled the onion layer by layer by layer. And we talked about so much valuable information. This is going to be one of the best podcasts you listen to, period. If you're targeting American Airlines, even on the periphery, this is going to just sharpen your sword. It is so good. A couple things real quick before I get into it. Like I mentioned, I was in a conference room in the Renaissance Hotel and they were having a breakfast right next door. So you're just going to hear some stuff in the background. It is what it is. It's going to be okay. I apologize for the loud noises and stuff, but man, I'm so glad I got to capture this interview. Another thing is I'm going to divide it up into two interviews, two podcast sessions, because it's that valuable. It's that good that you just need to take one bite today. Okay, just one bite, and then take a break and marinate on it and think about it and hear the things that he's saying and what is the deeper meaning of the things that he's saying. You need to know, and you need to think, and you need to ponder, and you need to discern. Find that moment of zen in your life to really get in touch with what he's saying. And I'm serious. Serious as a heart attack. It's true. Like, you really need to dive into this. There's a lot to unpack. So that's the first thing. Or maybe it's the second thing. I don't remember. But I do think this. You should review this podcast. Write a little something. Seriously, write something. Whether you love it or whether you hate it, give me a review. That's it. And last but not least, let's have a quick word from our sponsors, because without them, we wouldn't have this awesome podcast. Hey, pilot, it's Nick. I want to tell you about a great friend of the show, Timothy P. Pope. He's a financial planner, and he's completely focused on the professional pilot. He's the kind of guy you want to go to for real talk to help you figure out your financial future. With so many upgrades and so many transitions and so many things going on, you owe it to yourself to give him a call. He'll help you design and execute really smart financial planning strategies, whether it's retirement planning, investment management, military transition, tax planning. He's a great financial planning partner, Timothy P. Pope, CFP, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. Give him a shout. All the information's in the show notes. You should definitely tell him I told you to call. All right, everybody. I have a super special guest, Cory Glenn, the Director of Pilot Recruiting and Development at American Airlines. Cory, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Happy to be here, Nick.
Dude, I really appreciate you taking this time. You are a person that is so busy, and for sitting down here, man, like, beers on me until we never meet again. This is so awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. So today I just want to talk about your experience as Director of Recruiting and kind of all the ins and outs. I want to try to ask the questions that I get asked and see what you have to say. Before we do, so we are sitting here at NGPA, National Gay Pilots Association. The convention ended yesterday, and there's a lot of like residual get-togethers and stuff like that going on. And you guys did meet and greets, and then you did interviews, and people got CJOs.
They did. Yeah, we have 51 CJOs.
51. Out of 51, do you know how many people you guys interviewed?
I do.
Okay, got it. You know, we were talking beforehand, and I said, hey, did you hit your number of CJOs? And you said something really interesting that I think is really important. Will you talk about that, about did you hit that number and what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. Very early in the developing and mobilizing our interview process, we all obviously talked about having, okay, do we want to have an end result of a number of job offers? Do we want to have an end result of number of interviews? And it really comes down to supporting the organization that we do these at and giving the most amount of opportunities. And those opportunities exist both with the meet and greet. It's a hybrid concept of, hey, if someone has that meet and greet, what's the return on investment that they've spent that time, polished that resume, and got in front of one of our recruiter pilots to give them an opportunity to say, okay, looks like you're ready. Why wait? We're going to go ahead and move you to the next phase. And we've been doing that successfully. We tried to keep it relatively covert for quite a while, but obviously,
I know.
As it's gotten bigger and bigger and we've done more and more numbers, it has just been a fantastic way to connect with the candidates that know they want to fly for American, and also the candidates that are not sure what the industry has to offer and if this is a path for them.
Yeah. So you kick it off at OBAP? You did that first. Was that the first conference?
So in reality, it was actually NGPA in 2020.
Oh, okay.
So we did it in NGPA, a very small number to test it out. When you do small things, a lot of times folks don't catch on, and COVID happened very quickly. But NGPA and Women in Aviation in 2020, we did this. It was successful. We had an unexpected break to be able to refine the process when things kicked back off. And then we did it again actually last year at Women in Aviation, and then got bigger at OBAP and got bigger at RTAG.
Okay, cool. OBAP was my first conference that I went to, so I'm kind of late to the game. You're an old hat at all this. With the OBAP, with the interviews, what's the process like for being able to take that on the road? Because like when you call somebody into Fort Worth, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, they got to bring stacks of paperwork. They've got a pre-screen. They've got this. They've got that. It's a ton of stuff. So, like, how do you take that on the road?
No, that's exactly right. And I'm not going to give all of our secrets away, but I will tell you a little bit about what it takes to mobilize that. I mean, it is, and it's probably a lot of it has to do with my military upbringing and how we're able to extend ourselves out around the world, anywhere in the globe. And how we do that. It's the same thing. You put the logistics together. You take the critical components that you need to execute what you're looking to execute. For us, it's hiring the best pilots out there. So all of those components, it does take a substantial feet on the ground effort, and we bring a pretty good, sizable number of folks here to support the effort. We had over 60 American Airlines employees as part of that process here at NGPA. And again, it's what we have to do, one, to ensure the quality of the pilots that we hire, and also ensure the experience is very similar to that experience that we offer in Fort Worth.
So you said something interesting there. You had over 60, and you gave 51 CJOs. So that ratio, right? That it's not like it's easier and it takes less people. Like that, it probably proportionally takes more people to do it.
Absolutely,
man. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like surge operations. Everyone is carrying a lot more than they normally would. on a day in, day out basis.
Now, when you were testing this out and thinking about all this, did you like roll into a Starbucks in Irving and just have have pretend interviews and like bring your whole staff there and like, okay, you guys pretend to do this and we're going to see if everybody back at Fort Worth can manage it? Or did you just like, let's do it, let's go?
No, we actually did it component by component. So we started out, and there's a few folks out there that were part of those test cases. And fortunately, when you're testing out different things, if you move at a fast enough pace, the tests and the betas don't seem like what they are. And then once you get to the real event, you just see how it floats. And we did some tests where we went to some of our airport bases. So LAX was a big one there, and that was a few weeks before in GPA. We went out there. We had just changed to the pilot skills test that the pilots take today from our previous one that was in-house. You had to be in Dallas to do that. We put those on iPads, and then we brought in some folks from the local area that were in our candidate database of folks that we were looking at anyway. Gave them the opportunity to take that assessment. There, have our chief pilots engage them. And we were able to watch the organics of how that engagement and assessment worked at the same time as the engagement with our chiefs. That's kind of where, obviously, the meet and greet kind of develops to the next phase. And then we have time. We have everything we need to know that we want to bring this person into Fort Worth. And now that's extra lift and extra effort to get them there. When they're already in place, how can we make that next step? And that takes bringing in the interviewers, both our flight administration interviewers as well as our pilot interviewers. All right, that's easy enough to bring. We've got a few of those here. Let's test that out with a few folks. And then it worked. It just worked the first time. So we just grew the footprint, grew the process, and refined it.
So all of these things are in motion and all these things are happening. At the end of the day, like I'm nobody, right? I'm the average Joe pilot. And I would be willing to bet that the pilot that's listening here right now, the reason they're listening is because I'm interviewing you, not because they want to hear my voice, right? And they know, here's what they know. They know that they see the American Airlines social media group post this picture of a ton of pilots in a big, huge group holding up a folder with a silver AA logo on it. So at RTAC, like, I had people crying. It was awesome. The legend of it is building up so much hype. It seems like an overwhelming task to be able to try to do you have a certain amount of meet and greets that you'll do because you just can't handle the flow?
For folks that are out there that have been to events over the last few years, we went to our first RTAG and were overwhelmed.
And that was crazy.
In 21. We went, that was in San Diego, and
on the aircraft carrier for the party.
Right, exactly. It was such a fantastic experience.
Did you want to join the Navy at the end of that?
I learned to land in a crosswind, so, We got there, and it felt like we could do better because we brought what we thought was the right amount of folks to do the meet and greets, and the wait in our line was over 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then a big part of our culture at American is really going beyond of just the nurturing of your customers and taking care of them and flying them around. It's really caring for them in the process, and it's part of our mantra, right? Caring for people on life's journey. And it occurred to several of us, wow, they're spending this much time to wait for us. We've got to make this more efficient. It started out with, we handed out snacks to them while they were waiting in there, and then the timeline for the expo is finite when you have to be in and out of the expo hall. We had people that made the trek and made all of that effort to be there to see us. It didn't feel like the right thing to do to say, okay, it's 5 o'clock, too late. They had been in line for a long time. We actually took them outside, set up on the benches out there on the walkway to the center there, and made sure we talked to every single pilot that was there looking for information from American. And then that went back and go, gosh, what can we do to refine that? Well, if we bring more people, we can see more people, and that wait time shrinks down. Yeah. And that stepped forward, and you see this at all of the events now where you can pre-set up times to come see them. There were stories from pre-COVID, 2018, 2019 timeline where Lots of pilots would even just sleep in the hallways in the lines of the big three airlines just to get an opportunity to hope to see them. If you weren't there, it was like the debut of a Star Wars movie or something.
Yeah.
If you weren't camped out, you weren't going to have an opportunity to get in front of a recruiter. And then through all of that, it's a maybe. There's no return on investment. So that was the other part of how we got here is you have an opportunity. That opportunity exists by being here at that moment instead of hoping that that conversation materializes 3, 4, 6 months down the road into an opportunity.
Yeah, I knew guys and gals, like they would stack up like cordwood in a hotel room because it was, you're by the time you're done, it's $1,500.
Right.
And like for me, I was at a regional, and I have 5 kids, and I'm an adult, and I was at a regional making $1,500 every 2 weeks. So that was like 2 weeks, like half a month's worth of paycheck to try to go do that. And that and it's changed. And I think I don't want I really am talking to the pilot listening there. I don't want you to lose perspective. Like this opportunity has never ever happened before in aviation.
That's right.
Period. So, all right, I'll move on from there because I could talk about it all day. It's awesome.
As a prior regional pilot myself, there was a huge interest and intentionality to try to get away from all of that expenditure and time and spending time away from your family and the things that you love to do in order to hope that you get an opportunity.
Yeah, and so that kind of parlays to the next part of this conversation. It's one part culture, it's one part tradition, right? And you brought up the culture and caring for people and like what it means to be an American Airlines pilot, an American Airlines family member, right? For lack of a better term. And you say it like it comes off your tongue like water. It just is part of your conversation and who you are. How do you grow that? How do you have the people that are of the tradition of like, I had to mail in with a $75 check, and each time I wanted to change something, I had to send $10 more to get something updated and all those things. And you've got like, I had to do the hard thing that it was like, and like I would never get a shot. To now it's like, well, we have to have pilots to keep this company moving, not just profitable, like just open. Right? How do you have that conversation? Because I'm sure that you get that a lot.
Yeah. The unique thing and the blessing of me being able to be in this role is I do get to have a little bit of input and say on what the future culture looks like. And by embracing the pilots that we have and the folks that are involved in the process, we can converse and say, these are the things that we value about our group. These are the things we'd like to improve. And we can focus on that when we're looking at folks to come in and see us and talk with us. We also can, just like we just did, discuss a little bit of the struggles, what it took for us to get here, and how do we make the artificial barriers go away and maybe raise the barriers for the things that don't really screen anything or don't. And I say this sometimes to some candidates that come in, but when we did all of this during COVID, we took out the pieces, the components that got ingrained. Just tradition is built by just some crazy chance things that people try to do, and then all of a sudden you keep doing it, and we've always done it that way, and it's a tradition. It just somehow materializes that way. We were able to focus in on the things that don't really tell us how a person flies an airplane or how they care for each other. If you boil it down, those are the 2 most important things for our pilot group. Making sure that they have the technical proficiency and the professionalism to fly. And there's no other career out there where you're responsible for hundreds of lives at every moment, and every group that works on getting that process in motion can make a mistake, and it's up to one last barrier to stop those mistakes or catch those issues. And whether it's a manufacturing issue, a part that's left off, unintentionally mishandled bag, all the way up until we're up there in the flight deck flying that aircraft. And the thing that determines that to be an uneventful outcome and everyone getting to their destination on time safely is that those pilots can work together and troubleshoot and trap those errors that come up along the way, wherever that error started. And those 2 most important things are being able to work together cohesively as a group, not just with each other, but with the entire, all of our colleagues, and having the best interests of our passengers, our customers at heart. And the other part is the professionalism that allows us to communicate that way.
Okay, pilot that's listening, that's sitting here and just heard Cory talk about some things. The thing he said there that resonates is that trapping errors. And the basis conversation for us about trapping errors is all about the idea of threat and error management. It's like crucial part, like evolution of crew resource management is threat and error management. And if you don't know what threat and error management is, like keep listening, finish listening to the podcast and keep subscribing and reviewing, but do go and watch some YouTube videos. Do go and dive deep, because threat and error management, like that's the thing that you are more likely to fly into a Sharknado in Germany than you are to die in an airplane accident. And it's just because of the professionalism of the pilots and their understanding of safety culture and threat and error management. So if you are not already well versed in that, it's time to start.
Absolutely. It's never too early.
It's never too early. Absolutely. So, okay, let's continue this to this next level. When Spitfire, the company that I work with, it was created to serve minorities, women, people of a diverse background. Like that's why we started. And I'm a white guy, and I'm a huge advocate for the things that we do because I love people and I love who we are. Like being this person that I am, I hear the conversations of these airlines. They're hiring minorities, women, people of color, like all these different types of people, and lowering their standards to get more. And this is a super difficult question for me to ask because I don't want to come off as somebody that's bigoted or anything like that. But I hear that, and here you are, and I get to be with you and have this conversation. I want to ask an uncomfortable question to you. So how do you handle that?
Well, first of all, ignoring an issue that exists doesn't make it go away. It just allows it to fester. So I appreciate your candidness in addressing that head on and discussing something that's not always easy to talk about.
It's super uncomfortable right now.
For those of us of color, our entire lives, we've been grown and learned and adapted to figure out the subtleties and the unsubtleties of those discussions. So I feel pretty comfortable talking about that. First and foremost, for me, I don't want anyone to be able to challenge my credibility and say, I know how you got that job and it has everything to do with what color your skin is, and not that you're an amazing pilot that takes care of people. Those things should be first, and those things are first in how we go about doing that. But also I'm aware, and I've been around, I was an adult before I saw a pilot that looked anything remotely like me. I was an adult when I learned about the Tuskegee Airmen. Those things didn't exist in the developmental phases that normally us as people decide what we want to identify with and how and who we want to be and what we want to choose as a profession. That said, I knew I was attracted to flying airplanes when as far back as probably 3 years old. I was one of those that always wanted to fly. How can I get there? Trying to figure out all the opportunities to get around aircraft, get around people, and I didn't know any real pilots at the time to be able to pick their brain and get to learn and see how they operated. So it took me a little longer to get here, number one, and as I got through there, again, there were lots of barriers to entry. Obviously, cost is one of the biggest barriers to entry into this profession. And because things are changing quite a bit, fortunately, in the industry, but when you and I were going through those processes, we were talking a little earlier about how things used to be at the regionals. It was such a delayed return on investment for the outlay it takes to get into the industry, to get to a point that life is comfortable and you're taking care of your family and yourself and maybe achieving some of your financial goals. For people that are in underserved communities, they haven't even seen or are around that. So part of it has to do with exposure and giving them the opportunity to see it. But the other thing is that all of them want to be professionals. The ones that join, they want to be recognized as technically proficient, technical equals, and be able to have a cohesive conversation. And again, the threat and error management model of being able to diffuse threats and fly safe aircraft. It is important, though, that every person that we fly around is represented in some form or fashion on the flight deck. I look at diversity and much broader spectrums than the typical sexual orientation, gender, race, and or upbringing, economic association. And it's also a variance in background and experience, military versus civilian, flight instructing versus Part 135. Growing up as a third or fourth generation pilot is as diverse as well as someone that's their first generation. So looking at the diversity at a broader spectrum and knowing that that representation allows a lot more people to affiliate. When I first saw another black pilot out there that was in a uniform, that moment is the moment that I decided, okay, it's been done before, I can do this. Up to that point, I wanted to do it. I wasn't sure if I could. That gave me the confidence to continue to drive forward and push through those obstacles and get into the industry. And then when I did that, I'm also aware that none of my peers looked like me, and so I worked a little harder to try to shine and be a little bit better in that process, and because I did not want anyone to challenge my qualifications. And so coming into this role, being very, very hyper aware of that aspect, both for people that are diverse as well as people that are not diverse, recognizing that it is becoming much more diverse than it ever was. I wanted to be absolutely crystal clear that the people that we hire all meet the same standard. And so when we have diversified the flight deck, we've done an amazing job. We've been close to 30%. That said, that's 65% are still white men. So there's still plenty of seats for everyone out there. The way we go about that is the same way that most people go about buying a car. And the way that we do that is we look for all of the components, what makes and decides exactly what's important. For us, for a competitive pilot, the same way you go about a car. Do you need a pickup truck? Do you need a sedan? Do you need a sports car? Do you want leather seats? Do you want air, dual climate control? All of those things, what kind of performance do you want? Once you decide on that vehicle, then you go to the dealer and say, this is what I want. Do you have that car in blue? That's the same way we go about diversity. We look for those standards that we think are competitive pilots. Once we identify that group of folks, we go a step further and say, okay, let's find a few more that are people of color. Let's find a few more that are women. And it's a proven concept. We've hired over 2,700 pilots in the last 15 months.
Oh my God.
The average rate of unsuccessful training prior to that, and in the industry outside of our group, is about 1 to 2 pilots per 350 don't make it through a training program. We've had 1 out of 2,700 that didn't make it through the training program.
Man.
So that tells us that we're doing things right and we're finding the best pilots.
Yeah, gosh. You forgot one diverse group that I'm like, what about helicopter pilots?
Yeah, what about them? No. I'll actually talk about that a little bit, because one of the things I also recognize coming into that, I looked a lot at some studies that are out there, and it's not a surprise. And this is valuable for anyone out there, whether they flew fixed wing, rotor wing, piston, jet, all of those things. The fact is that check ride failures peak. If you were to look at when the most check ride failures occur in basically a progression or the career of a pilot, they happen at the transitions. So when you're looking at someone that's going from rotor wing to fixed wing, that transition, you see a little bit of a spike if you aggregate all of the check rides, transitioning from piston to turboprop or turboprop to jet or straight wing to swept wing. All of those transitions, right seat to left seat, those are where the peaks and training failures happen. And so if someone is able to navigate that without an issue, it instills a lot of confidence that, okay, the next transition is probably going to be less prone to have an issue. And for helicopter pilots specifically, especially ones that flown multi-engine turbine helicopters with a crew, a lot of those systems work exactly the same way. CRM works the same way. Taking care of the aircraft and the environment operationally works the same way. The only difference is, you do this on a go-around versus that on a go-around.
Hands forward, hands back, yeah.
Yes.
And it's super sweaty.
Yeah, yes. Well, there's some training aircraft that I flew on the fixed wing side that are super sweaty too.
Man,
so.
yeah, so same.
Right. So we transitioned. There is not this amount of turbine translates to this amount of jet, or this amount of rotor wing translates to this amount of fixed wing. It's really, have you made a transition? You've made that transition. For a rotorcraft pilot that's flown 60s or 53s or anything that's sizable with the crew, we're going to give that same amount of time credit towards our total time if they made a transition.
Yeah. So has there been any talk to like looking into RTP programs?
So with American, because we have 3 wholly owned regional partners, that's where the focus for the RTP programs has existed. There's a lot of discussion around that, and that takes resources.
Yeah.
And right now, it's not a secret. The resources that are short right now are producing captains to fly the regional jets out there.
The regionals that are short. Talk to me. So are you saying the short like we don't have enough captains at the regionals?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, like it's an opportunity to leverage and help out the wholly owned, because like if you do that, then you essentially take away a huge opportunity for the company that you own to be able to be successful.
So as for the RTP programs, there's a little bit of that, but all of our resources at the mainline level are drawn to, because we fly 4 different fleets, training those 4 different fleets. We are, to much surprise to some folks, but not others, is that as the world's largest airline, we don't have a shortage of accessing the pilots that we're looking for. We have thousands of applications on file, and all of those applications meet our minimum requirements, and we're able to go that step further and look for the ones that are competitive and have not had a problem sourcing at that. So especially organizations, companies relatively large, you apply the resources where you feel the greatest need.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that need is not at our level, it is at the regional level.
Got it. Would that be the same for people that don't have an ATP, that are, like whoever it is, they've got to get their ATP, whether they're going to go down to Sanders Aviation or whatever and knock it out, right? Like, what is that kind of the same line of thinking?
It really is. It is because it takes extra effort to start separating and managing them. Then once you start adding extra steps, those are extra opportunities for errors. We're not at that threshold to try to. We're maximizing the resources we have now for the opportunities for the folks that are ready now. And I can tell you, I'm very aware of the disparity for folks that go the civilian pathway, and at the regional level and at the LCC level, they will provide the transition from a restricted to unrestricted ATP, or even from an ATP written and to through the ATP CTP course to get the actual ATP in hand. It isn't affecting us at that level, and so we haven't applied resources to accept that yet.
No, that makes sense. So thank you for answering that. I get so many phone calls about that.
I know, I do too, and and it is not a too bad, you got to do it anyway thing from my perspective. It's just one of those things that once we start doing that, it opens up, again, like I said, opportunities for errors in the training process that to fly some of the places that we fly and some of the aircraft that we fly, you cannot have a restricted ATP to do that type of operation. So we need to have everyone have an unrestricted ATP. And again, all of our sims are 24/7, 365, plus several leased sims with other operators to get all of our training, because our retirements are so high for the next 5 years. It is every training resource needs to be applied to keeping folks in the operation.
All right, so you just teed up 15 more questions that I have, so we're not done yet. Is Sims like the bottleneck? Like simulator accessibility? Is it OE? Is it instructors for NDOC? Is it people that are like interview team, like not enough interviewers, like, or not enough? Like, what is the bottleneck when you guys look at it?
Yeah. Is finding that line of efficiency and maximizing output. And that happens along the board. And when you have a program or a process as complex as hiring a pilot, getting them trained, getting the NDOC, getting them an aircraft type, and then 6 months later, they're not on the airplane they want to change to another airplane, and the requirements to do that, it becomes a very convoluted network of maximizing and making sure you have the check pilots and the training pilots and the ground instructors and the simulators to balance and match the amount of movement. In the next 30 months, more than 50% of the wide-body pilots at American retire.
30 months, less than 3 years.
Captains, I should say, yeah.
Okay.
Less than 3 years.
So then let's talk about seniority. Like, is that the biggest reason to come to American? Because
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the biggest reason is probably we have 10 domiciles, which are great places to live.
You have so many.
And then living close to base just exponentially increases quality of life.
Yeah.
So the number one reason is that we have bases and where a lot of people love to live.
Yeah.
The number very close to reason is because of the movement, because of the drastic change in seniority.
So right now we're in, what are we in? We're in February of 2023. I think, am I right in saying it's going to take like if you want to be the bottom girl on the seniority list as left seater, it's going to be like 2 years-ish to be in the left seat right now?
Right now, so in that timeline is different, right? So when I was hired in 2014,
Okay.
the upgrade time was 23 years.
Yeah.
All right. But
You made it.
That didn't make my upgrade time 23 years. When I got hired, my upgrade time, I could have held captain and right at 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the same is true today. Our upgrade time today for people on property is just at 2 years. But the people that we're hiring today, it's still shrinking. And we're expecting that to be probably 15 to 16 months to be Airbus or 737 captain. And the way that we do our bid cycles is quarterly bids, and we put you in training right after that. So that is from time that you step foot on property for your day one to the time that you're operating that aircraft as that in that seat.
My sim partner from Frontier is at American in dock right now. And he is, first off, the coolest cat I ever met. Also, like, he is so excited about that seniority. He lives in Charlotte. And when I grew up about an hour outside of Charlotte, there was this guy named Jim Crawford. Jim is, do you know him?
I do.
You're kidding. Okay. So where I grew up was super duper poor. And he was like the hero of this little tiny town because he flew for USA, which became American. And I helped him when I was 14 years old. I helped him build his house. And he built it by himself. It was unbelievable. It took him forever. And he took me for a flight, my very first flight in a Pitts special that he had. And long story short, I went to college. I lost touch with him, never saw him again. 20 years later, I went and knocked on his door. Like, I drove home from my high school reunion, knocked on his door, and his wife answered. And I was like, hey, do you remember me? I was 14 the last time I saw you. And I told him, like, you're the guy that inspired me to, like, fly. And he was a junior captain in Charlotte 20 years later. And his timing, it just was a big time struggle. And hats off to, he did it. He raised an awesome family. He did all the things. But the cards you're dealt, you don't get to choose what cards you're dealt.
That's right.
And now my sim partner who lives and is going to be in the same town, like, Jim couldn't hold Charlotte 15 years in, right? And now Philip's like, yeah, I got Philly, but next bid cycle, I pretty much am going to be like
have seniority and be in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Amazing.
It is amazing. Thank you for letting me tell you that story that doesn't really matter. But like, it just shows you the senior, because you are like, let's be clear, like American has the biggest seniority swing of any airline.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
I mean, it's a huge carrot because like people that are listening today, they know that like, okay, there's a TA, like a contract agreement that's being voted on at Delta. American is working on, like the union's working on it. United, the union's working on it. FedEx, the union's working on it. UPS, everybody just approved it. JetBlue had one go through, like, so it's everybody, right? And so it's all going through. So you get like one person's going to have more money by $1 or $2 or whatever. It's like when it comes down to it, you're going to make, wherever you pick, you're going to make a ton of money.
Absolutely. Couldn't be a better time.
But it's the quality of life that you get with seniority that's the difference maker for your life, right?
Absolutely.
Because like you can only buy so much crap before you're like, I got it all.
Right.
But like when you're home with your kids, if you don't have kids, you're gonna probably, or you're gonna have to be part of a family.
You have things you want to do outside of work that you're going to spend time with and money on.
Yeah.
And having the opportunity, maximum opportunity to do that is really what makes this such an amazing career, right? We get a lot of that time.
Yeah. Hey, before you jump out of here and go on to the next podcast, can I ask a big favor? Would you mind going over to your app that you're listening to this podcast on and give me a review? Give me a 5-star review if you love it. Give me a 1-star review if it totally sucks. Put a comment in there, something that is helpful. It helps me. It helps get the word out there. It helps people find the podcast, and that's super cool. If you don't do that, maybe you could just share the podcast with a friend. Tell a buddy who's trying to figure it out, trying to sort out this pilot dream of theirs and get a little bit further. That is super awesome as well. Last, if you don't do either of those two things, how about this? Find a way today to make yourself 1% better. Do that thing that you've been putting off. Put your foot forward, make movement, get yourself going, get that inertia that you need to succeed in this industry. So that's your choice. Leave a review, tell a friend, or make yourself better. Either way, it's all a good choice. And I'm super stoked you're listening, and I will see you on the next episode. The statements made on this show are my own opinions and do not reflect, nor are they under any direction from my employer.